Hi, I'm Jennifer Johnson and I raise sheep for their wool. In my last video, I talked about the constraints that we're facing this year as we come into our breeding season with our sheep. So we like to breed our sheep because we're working to improve our fleeces for hand spinners to enjoy. And you do that by introducing new sheep to your flock every year. And the way we choose to do it is to breed our rams and ewes in the fall for spring lambs. What I wanted to show you in this video is how I use data to make my selection of which rams and ewes we're going to put together and breed to make lambs that produce those beautiful, fine, crimpy fleeces. So we are very data-based here with our process. It is not an emotional based. We don't, kind of go off on a whim. It's really very specific based on data. So I want to show you some of the tools and data that we use to make these breeding decisions. The first thing I wanted to show you is this tool, and I keep it in this little gift box for, I don't know why. But what we have here is an index card that I make up for every sheep in my flock, both ewes and rams. And I start this card when we decide that we're going to be keeping that sheep in our flock. And on the card is, well, her name or his name, the year of their birth. Now the year is important when I look at this data for a few reasons. Number one is I don't breed lambs. So if this birth year says 2024, I'll know to just put her aside. I'll put that card aside and not use it as I make my breeding decisions. If she's too old, we don't breed ewes that are older than 10 years. So I can just use this as a quick reference. So if anybody is on here and she is a ewe that was born in 2014 or earlier, she will also get set to the side and not be put into a breeding group. The next line has the pattern and the color. And I also indicate the color with a color coding here, where I have G for gray in blue. So those are my blues. W is white, and I do that in green. Fawn is F with orange. And I do white with green. Leighton, I haven't coded hers yet because she's a fairly new ewe. So some of these cards need to be updated. And I think my Moritz are just a capital M with brown. So it's a really easy reference for me. There's another code here I've created, and I actually have to look at the key because I don't remember it. But I think what it is the gold has the best fleece yield. And that was based on a calculation that I'll show you when I go to my spreadsheet. And then the silver is the next, and the green is the lowest. There's three colors that I can easily see that tell me information about the fleece quality. The next line, I just put whether she's a ewe or if it's a ram, for obvious reasons, because there's one ram for many ewes. And then most important and the most useful thing I have on the index cards are the ewes or rams, mother and father, sire and dam, and then the parents of the sire and dam. And the reason I need that information, one of the constraints I talked about in my last video was I don't breed sheep that are related. So this makes it really easy for me to ensure that I don't accidentally set up a breeding group with related sheep. So I'm going to show you what I mean. Let's just pretend that Juliet is a ram and Fanny is a ewe. None of the names here, there's 6 names plus Juliet herself, so 7 names, can be the same on this card as on this card. So it just makes it really simple for me. I can also go and look at the pedigree or look at the spreadsheet, but this is usually what I use to ensure that I'm not breeding related sheep, because this is going to get me her grandparents. So that's where I use the cards. I also include on here every year I put the spinning fineness. So you can see Fanny, we started doing her Micron testing in 2018, and I have it all the way to 2024, which is a really interesting tool to use for me because I can see, as you know, one of the things that's important to me is older ewes stay in the flock because they retain their fineness. I can continue to offer Fanny's fleece with a lot of pride because in 2024, her spinning fineness was 21.5, which is remarkable. And you know that wool gets prickly at about 28 microns. That's our threshold for prickle factor is what they call it. So 21.5 is like silk or cashmere. It's just that soft and nice. But so I can see here that Fanny is the epitome of what we're looking for in a senior ewe, and that her fineness has stayed. Many times with other breeds, or even within the Shetland breed, as the ewe gets older, her fleece will get coarser. So we're breeding to exclude that from our flock. I hope that makes sense. All right, so the cards, as you can see, so what I do when breeding time comes with the tool here, it's also a physical tool, is I'll lay it out on the table and I'll put the rams I think I want to use on the top, and then I will just put the ewes down underneath the ram to make up my little pre-breeding groups, and just really is a great tool. So if you are thinking about breeding and you have a flock size of greater than 10, let's say, I strongly recommend that you make up these cards, because they have really, we always joke that we're going to consult the cards before we make any decisions about, even we use them also for when it's time to put a sales list together. Just really great information. So that's my data / tool for the whole flock. There's another set of data that we use that I think sets us apart from a lot of sheep breeders, and that is really scientific. This is our average fiber diameter report. In this report, we have data about every single ewe and ram in our flock as it relates specifically to their wool. The way it works is we collect a sample from each sheep in the spring once they've reached their full length growth. And we send that sample, it's usually like a 1 by 1 inch sample that we pull from a very specific spot on their body so that we've got consistency from one sheep to the next. And we send that into a lab, and they will measure the diameter of roughly 25 strands of fiber and give us data about those diameters. It's called an average fiber diameter. And I just mentioned, a fiber diameter of 28 or more is prickly, and we aren't able to bear wearing it. It's too scratchy for us. So what this tells us is, in great detail, what the fiber diameter is of the sheep. And there's all sorts of other statistics in here. Rich is a statistician, so this is really meaningful to him. Things like the staple length, what the lowest average fiber diameter is of the sample, and because they're not all going to be the same, right? Each sample, each fiber, individual fiber is going to have a different diameter. We talk about this, like if you have a pile of silk and then you put one little piece of steel wool in that pile of silk and you rub it against your skin, you're going to feel the steel wool. So if you have a minimum average fiber diameter of 21, but you have maybe 3 strands in there that were 32, that fleece is going to be scratchy. So there's a lot of really interesting information here that helps us decide which sheep are going to achieve the goal that we set for ourselves, which is next to skin soft, crimpy. Crimp information is also in here, and a good staple length for hand spinners to enjoy. There's a lot. There's so much information here, and we made a video many years ago, which I'm going to put a link to it here. And I think we're due for another one, because we've learned a lot since then as we've used this data for making breeding decisions. So this is the summary report, and what this tells us is for each ewe, each line on this report is a different sheep in our flock, and then the row is all of the data related to the sample that we submitted about that particular ewe. The one that we hone in on that's a good general rule of thumb is the spinning fineness. Very proud that our spinning fineness in 2024, this is our samples from last spring, was 21.8, which is, we're right where we want to be. So what we'll do is we'll take a look at each and every sheep, and once we've excluded ewes that are aging out, we'll then take a look at their spinning fineness to say, is this something that we want to perpetuate in our flock? Is this a ewe that we love certain qualities like her frame, but now we want to improve her fleece? So it gives us a ton of information and power as we're making our decisions. So there's 2 pages that summarize the data, and then we get is for each ewe, they graph the information so you can get a really quick visual. This is a lot more useful for Rich than for me. This doesn't really resonate with me, but for Rich, this in a second, he can tell you what her fleece is going to look like by just looking at this graph here. It's crazy. Anyways, okay, so this is the report from this year. Normally, I don't print them out like this, but I thought I wanted to show you in this video just how much data and what this report looks like. It's not difficult and it's not really expensive to get this data. I'm thinking that we pay maybe $6 per sample. That includes the shipping to get it to them. And then we ask them to send us the samples back, the actual wool samples in the bags. So it's really, really good data to have. If you're a member of the Fine Fleece Shetland Sheep Association, you actually have to have this data in order to register your sheep with that registry because it's a performance registry, which means you can't register them unless you prove with data that you've met their standard. So yeah, this is probably the most sciencey, mathy element that we use when we make our breeding decisions, but it's really important. So there's that. And I will share links to how to do this, where the lab is that we use, and I'm pretty certain I have a video of us collecting the samples so you can see how we do it. So there's that piece. Okay, the next piece of data that I use, and I guess this is more of a tool than actual data, is I have one spreadsheet that I've been maintaining for years of our flock and all of the information that I have been able to collect, and all of it, but most of it that's spreadsheet friendly. And I keep it in this spreadsheet. So this is Google Sheets, which is free. So if you have Excel, you can also use that, but that, you pay Microsoft a subscription. But the Google Sheets works perfectly fine, and it's free. So I have these, they're called tabs along the bottom, so you can have multiple spreadsheets. And all a spreadsheet is if you're familiar with, if you've ever used graph paper, it's a way to keep your data organized into individual cells. So it's almost like my Micron report, where every row is one particular sheep, ram or ewe. And then each column on the top here has the information related to that ewe. This is handy as opposed to the cards because I'm pretty comfortable with spreadsheets, so I can do things like filter. So you can see here I've got some colors here. For some reason, at some point in time, I was doing something where I wanted to be able to filter by these particular ewes, so I put a color in the cell. So there's just stuff like that that I use. The other thing about this that's nice is it's really easy for me to search back, to look back and look at like, well, how many lambs did Fanny have over the years, and I can do a search that takes me through the entire spreadsheet. I can get that through her pedigree on the NASA site, but it's just another way to manipulate the data to make it easy for us when it comes time to make breeding decisions. I use this a lot all year. I don't necessarily use it as much when I use the cards very heavily during breeding to make breeding decisions, but I will always go back and look at the data if I want to find something more specific in the actual spreadsheet. I don't know, I can take you through the cells, the columns real quickly here. So my first column talks about what the status is. So I make a new sheet. This is a sheet right here, and I've got different sheets here as I scroll through the different ones. Every year there's a new sheet. So come January 1st, I'm going to copy this sheet, rename it 2025, and then anything that happens that year, the sheep stay on the spreadsheet. I just code them differently. So I'll show you here for my 2024 spreadsheet. In the first column here, I've got different categories. So I've got sheep that are for sale, coded as for sale, so that I remember who's available and who I'd be willing to sell. The OHN is oh heck no, meaning they're never leaving our farm ever. Let's see, some of them, like if I've sold some sheep, so there are sheep that I've moved off the farm this year, I don't delete them, I just leave them on here, but I code them as sold. So that I have that record going forward that I know that I sold her that year. That's important sometimes. And then sheep that pass on. sadly. I'll record that on there each year, so I'll be able to know exactly what year a particular ewe or ram left the flock to move on to greener pastures. So that's that. Then I have the name, their birth date, the actual specific date, not super important. More important is the year, but sometimes it's nice to know the day they were born. If I purchase them, the price, the registration number. So we register the majority of our sheep. All the ewes that stay with us get registered, and that is with the North American Shetland Sheep Breeders Association. They keep a registry just like with dogs. If you go to the kennel club to register your Labrador Retriever, it's the same exact thing. You get a number, and I'll show you what their pedigree looks like, but this is just that registration number, so I keep that in the spreadsheet. The name of their mother's registration number, which this stuff I don't have anywhere else, so this is handy if I ever need this. Their registration number, the sire's number, and then I have grandparent information. Column for the phenotype, which I'm really bad at keeping updated. Phenotype, if you want to look at my color sheep genetics video, here's the link. Phenotype is what they look like, not their genetic makeup necessarily, but what they look like. So it doesn't talk about what they carry, it just says she's a gray catmugget, not that she's carrying brown. A whole other really interesting topic that you can really lose yourself in. What their gender is, ewe or ram, their color, their ear tag color. So this is handy, not during making breeding decisions necessarily, but every year I try to use a different color so that when I'm out there in the barn I can easily see who my lambs are, because they all have white ear tags this year. I pretty much know who they are. It's also handy when I have visitors and I can say anybody in here with a white tag is a lamb. So that's kind of a nice thing. So I keep track of that here. Their ear tag number, which is really critical, especially with lambs. If I have 20 lambs in the very beginning, I don't really know who they're out of until I get to know them a little better. So having that ear tag number is really helpful. Then I have a calculator for their age. Like I said, if somebody's 10 or older, they're not going to be bred. If they're a lamb, they're not going to get bred. And then features. And then I've got a lot of different notes. A lot of times what I'll do is if I'm going to be doing sheep care, I'll add columns where I can print out the whole sheep, bring it to the barn, and then helpers can write notes and stuff on this printed out version. A lot of data. So that's that spreadsheet. So those are three key pieces of data. The fourth data element that goes into making breeding decisions is physical. And it's actually a file. So I'm going to show you what that looks like and how I use that in the breeding process. So in this box, I have files for every single sheep in the flock, and I maintain those. I get their pedigree information, their fiber samples, cards that I make up each year for their fleeces, and it all goes in this. And this is active sheep that are in my flock. If I sell sheep or if a sheep passes away, she gets pulled from here and goes into another folder. So this is just the sheep that we have in the farm today. Okay, so let's take a look. So many times I get asked how many sheep are in my flock, and it's difficult to answer because I've always got, it's a very fluid number. There's sheep coming in, sheep leaving. But in a nutshell, if I have more sheep than what fit in this bin, I'm in trouble. So kind of my rule of thumb is if this is getting too full and I can't fit any more in there, then it's time to do some adjusting. So this is, oh, it smells good. I got fiber samples in here, so it smells like wool, and you know I love what that raw wool smells like, and it's in there, yum yum. All right, so what I want to show you is the data that I keep for each sheep. So I'm going to pull out Sebastian's file here. The way I have these organized, it's by year, so you can see I've got like tabs for each year, and then within the year, the ewes and rams that are still in the flock get in the same year, and I sort them by ear tag. So you can see this one is Mabel 1370, Adelina 1372, Ty 1373, and then so it's oldest in the back and youngest in the front. So I don't have my 2024. I'm just looking at this. I don't have my 2024 lambs in here because I haven't named them yet. They haven't been registered. I got to get working on that. All right, so anyway, so I pulled out Sebastian. So on the folder is his name, the year he was born, and his ear tag number. And here's the data, the physical hard copy data. This is the original pedigree, which is their papers. And there's all the data that I've already covered, including the pedigree down here, 5-generation pedigree, his registration number, information about his colors and markings, sire and dam, who's the breeder and who's the owner. So this information is important. In the database, you can go in there and you could look at the entire population of Shetland sheep owned by everyone in North America that's part of this association. So let's say you want to find, you know, a Myoget horned ram with spots that's in New York State. You can do all those filters in that database to try and find that particular animal. So that's where the NASA database comes into play. So also in here are my samples that I collected each year before they get sent in for average fiber diameter testing. So there's about the amount of wool that you would need to submit to Texas A&M, which is the lab we use to get our average fiber diameter. This is the card that we make up every year with an analysis of the fleece, where I put the weight of the fleece. Sebastian's not, oh, here we go, here's a good one. How much it weighed before I skirted it, what did I think about it? This one I said, meh. How I'm going to dispose of it, whether I'm going to sell it, process it, or put it in my top. So I have a card like this for every year, and it's also got a tiny sample. And then on the back of that same card, I put their Micron report. And then any other details or information get added to this file. So that's another piece of data and way that I organize the information about our sheep to help me as I make my breeding decisions. So that covers the data that I use when I make my breeding decisions. And I guess I'm going to call it the data as well as the tools I use to organize it and make it useful for me so that I can assimilate it, analyze it, and make decisions. So once again, what I use: the index cards, the average fiber diameter report with all the data, the spreadsheet that I keep in Google Sheets, and a physical file folder. And there is some duplication of data here, but the way it's presented to me is very helpful, and it allows me to make the best selection of which rams to put with which ewes in the fall for our spring lambs, who will produce beautiful, soft, fine, crimpy fleeces for our hand spinners to enjoy. Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you can come back soon. If you did like it, it would really help the farm if you could click the like button. And also, if you could subscribe to the channel, and what that does is it allows you to see when I have new content available. If you click on the little bell when you subscribe, then you'll get notifications and actual alerts. I've begun doing live feeds on Friday at noon from the barn on my YouTube channel. So if you're subscribed and are getting alerts, you'll be alerted to when I go live. So if you want to spend some time with the sheep in the barn. So thanks again for watching the video. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you can come back soon.